I'm Michelle Graves, your host on today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm glad to have you here. Now, at The Power of Money, we are interested in three things happening. First, we want you to get the necessary education so that you and your family can make the decisions that will impact positively on you in your financial life. The second thing is that you be empowered to prosper. I only want the best for you. And you can only get that if you have education and then the drive to make it happen. And the third thing that is so important to me is that you recognize that life is more than a journey and that you be energized so that you can begin to participate in the truly joyous experience of living. So here's to empowerment, here's to education, and here's to energy. I'm Michelle Graves, your host, Power of Money, and here we go. And here we go. And welcome to all of you today in the midst of COVID-19, officially a pandemic. And has it not changed how we look at life, how we look at people, how we plan ahead, and most importantly, how we prepare our children? Because children are our legacy. As you get older like myself, you begin to really appreciate the power that comes from preparing children for a new world. Because it looks like, whether we ask for it or not, it looks like that's what we're facing today. So with that backdrop, I determined that I wanted to really look at this issue of our children and try to bring in experts and professionals to dig deeper into how we handle our children, what's going on with them, and what we can do to make their lives a lot more tolerable. And I say this to all of you. Children love living. They love life. They like to be out and about. They like to do things. They like their friends. They like their bicycles. They like exploring. These are things that children like that have to do with youth, and it has nothing to do with U.S. children or children in Asia or children in Europe. Children like to play, and they like to have fun, and they like to grow and develop. So we're in a situation that is unprecedented. And I must say truthfully, because I thought 9/11 was the unspeakable, but I'm here to tell you that, in my opinion, this pandemic from this virus has so thrown everything off that I would have to say this is worse than our last catastrophe. So, consistent with what my personal beliefs are, I'm bringing on today's segment the superintendent of Dayton, Ohio Public Schools, Dr. Elizabeth Lolli. And she is going to be talking about, for the next hour, what Dayton Public Schools is doing in the midst of this crisis, and how she, a very seasoned and experienced superintendent, how she is handling it, and what steps she's taking moving forward to prepare us in the days ahead. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me on your show.
I would shake your hands, but and I'd even do this, but we are honoring, for those of you watching, we are honoring the 6-foot distancing rule, and I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yes, thank you.
Let's begin by giving us and your viewers a little bit of background about who you are.
I'm Elizabeth Lolli. I am the superintendent of the Dayton Public Schools. I've been in Dayton for 4 years now. As the superintendent, I've been there just a little over 2 years. I started off as the associate superintendent of curriculum in Dayton, and I have 43 years of experience in education.
Oh my goodness.
I taught in the Middletown City Schools just south of Dayton, and then I became an administrator in the Middletown City Schools as well. I worked at, after I left the Middletown City Schools, I went to Kent State University and was a professor there.
Oh my goodness.
In Northeast Ohio.
Okay.
And I worked for Kent State for 12 years, although not as a full-time professor after my first 2 years as a full-time professor. After that, I returned to public education in the Nordonia Hills City Schools, and then went to Mayfield City Schools. As both of those schools, I was an associate superintendent for curriculum and instruction. And then I ended up in the Barberton City Schools, which is outside of Akron, as the superintendent.
Oh my goodness.
So I worked in Barberton. I continued to teach my classes at Kent State University for those 12 years that I was still in Northeast Ohio. And then I returned home and was superintendent in Monroe Local Schools, which is a small rural school district just south of Middletown.
Yes.
And then returned back to Middletown as the curriculum person there to finish my career. And things didn't pan out that I finished my career there. I basically got a pull to come to Dayton and to work in the curriculum area in Dayton. So I actually followed that pull, you know, that tug, and applied in Dayton, and actually was hired as the associate superintendent and have been here ever since. And it's a wonderful place to be. My mission has always been to serve children, and to serve children that need my skills and my abilities to make their lives what their lives should be, what they deserve, with a quality education. So Dayton has helped me continue to fulfill that mission of serving children first. So
I appreciate your exhaustive and extensive background, particularly in higher education, because I do think I'm familiar with Kent State, and again, that's where you're proven when you're using those skill sets in that environment and are able to take those skill sets and implement them into the area of public education.
Yes.
I think that's extremely powerful, and you should be commended for doing that. So you're in Dayton, a city that, by the way, I think is great. I commute here from Cincinnati, Ohio, to do this show, and people ask me all the time, why do you do that? And I said, it just grows on you. It's a community that just simply grows on you. And they're extremely progressive. Maybe it has to deal with the Wright brothers or their whole philosophy about learning. But it's a phenomenal community. People should be proud if they are from Dayton. It's a good community. So you're here as superintendent, and you find yourself with this mission, personal as well as public, and lo and behold, in December, January, things take a change. Right.
Yes.
And what was your first reaction to the information?
When we first heard from the governor that we were likely to close school, the team that I work with, which is an outstanding team, and I'm talking about the teacher team, I'm talking about the president of the teachers union, I'm talking about the administrators in Dayton, and I'm talking about the central office team. We all started to have conversation about what would we need to do. And immediately our curriculum team, within 2 days, pulled together a group of teachers who actually videotaped in our TV studio. They videotaped lessons for 2 weeks because we thought we would be closed about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we videotaped those lessons for all the subject areas that are tested, basically, and made sure that we were covered for those 2 weeks of lessons. And then as time went on, and we were going through those 2 weeks. One of those weeks, those 3 weeks of time before April, actually we were on spring break, so that helped us a little bit. But as we got to that second week of spring, you know, that week that we had spring break, which was week number 2, we realized that this was longer than just a 2-week closure. We continued to listen to the governor, and we continued to work through that process of closing school down, as far as sending everyone home to learn from their homes. The teachers to go to their homes, the bus drivers went to their homes, everyone returned home and remained there for 2 months. And as time went on, we realized that we needed to do something virtually for our students so they would not miss the full 9 weeks. We had 2 weeks of instruction covered.
Right.
So we started to roll out plans for students to have Chromebooks, realizing that many of our students did not have the opportunity to have the internet in their homes.
Right.
So we purchased Wi-Fi for our buses, and we parked our buses in neighborhoods at certain times during the day. And we passed out 1 Chromebook per family. If you had more than 4 children, we gave you a second Chromebook.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, that's all we could do.
Okay.
That's all we could manage, that's all that we had. And as time went on, we received some grants, we received some donations, and we received some CARES Act money that we actually have been able for this fall to purchase Chromebooks for all students to have one.
So every student has his or her Chromebook.
Yes, and our students that are in our CTE classes, our career technical classes, that need something more than a Chromebook, we have taken our laptops that we had for every building. We had carts of laptops. We have taken those and we've made those available for students that need that more powerful type of program because they load different programs on, like an Office suite or things like that.
Right.
So the students that are in career technical classes have received those laptops in addition to a Chromebook for those that don't need that powerful device. Also what we did was we purchased and refurbished and had some donations for Hotspots.
Excellent.
So every family received a hotspot who needed it, and then there are some families that had 4 or 5 children who were on at the same time right now, and they said this is not working well for us, so we gave them additional hotspots. So we are covered technology-wise across the district for every student in the Dayton Public Schools.
That is absolutely phenomenal. So there is not a challenge for parents who don't have Wi-Fi.
Correct.
They now have the hotspot alternative.
Correct.
Which is Wi-Fi. It is. So every family that has a student in the Dayton Public Schools from K through 12 has a hotspot.
If they requested it.
If they requested it.
And we had enough for 9,000 homes in the Dayton Public Schools.
Equipped 9,000.
Well, we didn't have that many requests. We've only had up to this point 1,500 requests.
That's still
hotspots.
a lot of requests.
Yes.
Because one of the challenges that I've read about is the inability of parents to connect in to learning virtually without a Wi-Fi internet connection, and that parents are struggling with how can we afford the service.
Yes.
The service is available. It's at a discount with a couple of the carriers, but it's not free. So if you're looking at a population mix of many parents who are working poor, single mothers, that type of a profile, they can't afford $25, $30 a month, even though it's needed. So you all were able to get grants and support.
Yes.
Cincinnati viewers, hello. Come on now, right? There are opportunities, okay? Geez, was it difficult, the grant process?
We actually received grants from a couple of different organizations. The Tate Foundation.
Yes.
They supplied us with $50,000 that we could purchase additional Chromebooks, and that occurred between the spring and the summer. And then we also had a very generous donation from the Connor Group here in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
They gave us 1,200 phones to use as hotspots because
at
the time,
my goodness,
you couldn't get a hotspot.
Right.
Because everyone was trying to get hotspots. So they provided that and paid for the service for a year.
They paid for
yes.
the service a year.
Yes, a very generous donation. Then Montgomery County Educational Service Center also applied for grants through a variety of other opportunities that they had for all of Montgomery County schools. So we told them the amount of hotspots or Chromebooks that we might need, and they helped supply those as well. They purchased those with their grant money. And then, of course, the Montgomery County, the CARES money that came through the county, we received money from them as well. So we've had such a tremendous amount of support. And as you said earlier, this is a vibrant community. This community surrounded the school systems, not just Dayton Public, but all the school systems in Montgomery County, and especially Dayton Public school students. They have surrounded us and made sure that we have what we need to have to educate our students. And of course, our own Board of Education provided funding through their budgeting process as well. But without some of these other grants and this community support, it would not have been as easy. The hotspots themselves are $45 per month.
I'm an iPhone user. Hotspots, which are built into the platform, are wonderful, but they're not cheap.
Correct. Correct.
And you all have provided that service.
Yes.
That's, again, not to pat this community on its shoulders, but I've lived everywhere, seemingly, and this is a consistent thing I find with this community here. I'm just saying, they will take care of their community. And I think that's something to be very, very proud about. It really is. So now all the children have hotspots, have Chromebooks, except for the techies who have more advanced equipment, which again was given to them.
Correct.
They didn't have to purchase it. And so they're situated. So what's the next step?
Well, what happened was we wanted to come back face-to-face because we actually believe that being face-to-face with our students is the best opportunity. However, whenever Montgomery County turned red by their designation of high COVID activity, we made the decision that we would go to our second plan, which was virtual. And what we did was we spent the month, we pushed our start date back to September 8th, and we spent the month of August preparing the rest of what we had planned in the early spring. We put more meat on the bones of the plan, if you will. So we took that time to actually make sure we were ready to go. What did we need to do to make sure that our students were educated well? And then 2 weeks before school started, we brought our staff back and did 2 weeks full of training. And those trainings included a mandatory COVID training. How do we actually respond in our buildings when we are close to someone? What are we supposed to do if we hear that someone might not feel well? All of those sorts of things that you do as precautionary measures. And then we also provided a variety. Our curriculum team was outstanding in providing the opportunities for much more technology training, much more instructional training, all of those sorts of things to prepare people to work online. And we actually had a national consultant, Anita Archer, who actually worked with each of our grade level bands to talk about virtual learning and what that looked like in a situation where you're trying to model for students and you're trying to have them respond back and be engaged in the lessons. So the majority of our teachers attended those sessions, and those were before the actual report, the time that they had to report back to work occurred. So they attended that on their own. It was not mandated, which we really appreciate them taking the time to do that and to learn those strategies. And then we opened up school, but our virtual learning plan is different. You can do a remote learning plan where you have an isolated person who's teaching and not really connected to the students, and the student watches the lesson, picks up what they can, and maybe I can call into a hotline at night and get some support and some help. We decided that we wanted our students connected to their classroom teachers.
Oh my goodness, okay.
What we did was we have a series of teachers like we did in the spring who teach the standards, and it's about a 10-minute lesson every day on language arts. For example, in our early primary classes, One teacher teaches the reading lesson, the reading strategy, comprehension skill, whatever that happens to be. And then she teaches a phonics lesson, and then she may teach a writing lesson.
Okay.
But in between each of those 10-minute segments of the teacher modeling and instructing, the classroom teacher then turns off that video that's been made by a Dayton Public School teacher and interacts with her or his classroom.
Based on the information on
Correct.
that. Oh, that's very nice.
Correct. So they follow up with an interactive version of what the lesson just was. We call that in our district, we call that the we do part of the lesson, because the teacher did the I do. I do it this way, this is what it means. And now the students do the we do part with their classroom teacher. And
so
then,
that's each, just hypothetically, if you have 5 classrooms of children in the 3rd grade with an average class size of what, 25, 30?
yes,
Okay.
about 25.
About 25. So we're talking about 100 children listen to the primary instructor, and then they break off into their individual learning modules. Is that correct?
And actually their classroom teacher is in the classroom turning on that teacher.
Oh my goodness.
So everyone is watching from 8:30 until 10 o'clock. Everyone is watching the standards lesson by a Dayton Public School teacher, and then turning off the video and working directly with their 25 students in their large class group. Then in our early primary classrooms, our kindergarten through 3rd grade, our students come back at some point during that day and have a lesson, another lesson with their classroom teacher that has 7 to 10 students in it. And some are less than 7 to 10. Some may be 5 to 8 students. So there's very clear, direct instruction that that teacher can work with those young children and keep their reading skills moving forward and their math skills moving forward in a very small group setting. Now your lesson with me may not be until 11:30. Someone else's may be at 10:30, but you will have that time individually with me and 4 or 5 up to 10 students in my class. We also at the same time will provide ESL students, our English language learners, we provide them with a time where they are working directly with their teacher, their TESOL teacher. Or if you have, if you're a student with a disability, you have that block of time that you work directly with your teacher for that classroom. So I may be in 3 different small groups during the day because of the labels that indicate my learning path.
Right, right. Who designed that? That is so, was that a team approach, or was that based upon a consultant coming in and seeing?
No, I thought it up. and what we do, I joke a lot. I come up with all these harebrained ideas.
That's not harebrained. That's brilliant.
I share them with my curriculum team or my cabinet, and they take those ideas and they make them into a reality.
Okay.
So
you're the conceptualizer.
Yes. Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. But you have to have people that are smart to put it into place.
Absolutely.
So have you had any glitches?
The only glitches that we've had have been with the technology, and it's been nationwide. Google's had some bumps in the road because so many people are on Google all at the same time.
Yes.
Zoom has had some bumps in the road because of the same thing. But internally, our systems are strong enough to cover what we need to have them cover. But because of the national glitches, we have seen some frozen screens. We've had to have kids log in and log off and log back in, that sort of thing. So
that's not catastrophic.
No,
that's
no.
technical stuff.
Exactly.
That is, and so you all are using Google as your primary platform
Correct.
for these. That seems to be pretty consistent in the educational system with schools.
And many teachers have branched off to do Zoom because Zoom allows you to do some breakout rooms. So if you were to visit one of our high school Zoom rooms, you would see the lesson being taught by a DPS teacher who's teaching the standards, then that classroom teacher working with his or her students like we've talked about for the early primary, and then that teacher may also break that class out into different periods, or not periods,
really?
but different groupings.
Okay.
Because Zoom allows you to do that. So she or he may say, okay, the 5 of you, I want you to go to this Zoom room and I want you to do this.
Okay.
And then the 5 of you, I want you to go to this Zoom room and I'm going to be dropping in and out and checking on your progress. So they do some cooperative learning in the Zoom rooms. They do some problem solving in the Zoom rooms.
Yes, as a team.
Correct. And the students interact with each other. Teacher drops in and out of those rooms.
My words. So have you seen, because it would seem to me, this is so fantastic. I really do like it. It's changed my whole perspective on virtual learning, because I had some concerns about the quality of the learning process with, I mean, it's not touch.
Right.
That was my concern. Does a teacher need to touch you to be effective in your learning? And so what you're saying, that using this particular platform, it's working just fine.
It's working well. Our teachers have done a really good job, and I have to commend them. The curriculum team continues to support, and our OEC team, which is the Office of Exceptional Children.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
Yes, they continue to support as well. Is it perfect yet? No, it is not perfect yet, but I cannot commend the work that's gone behind it enough, because we are ready and prepared and able to teach our students. We need our students to show up.
Okay, when you say show up, log in.
Correct.
How's that going?
Well, in our elementaries, it's going very well.
Okay.
In our middle and high schools, some days are questionable.
Okay.
And especially at our high school levels.
Well, you know, young people, they know how this works.
Yes.
You do know that.
Yes.
And they just don't want to do it.
Yes.
For whatever reason. I mean,
and it's really unfortunate, because this is their future.
It absolutely
is. If they don't show up and complete the classes, then they'll be returning to that grade level.
Right.
You know, they'll be failed.
Right.
Because it's not like in the spring, whenever no one failed anyone, and you know, you because it was so new and so scattered. This is real school, and that's the word that has to come out to our parents and has to get out to our older students. It's real school.
So given the fact that it's now all digital, the ability to communicate with the parents should be easier. Yes? No?
Well, we communicate with our parents in a couple of different ways.
Okay.
We communicate with our parents through a robocall, which most schools do, where I might make an announcement. I may give them information. We communicate by oftentimes by me doing a video, and we put it out on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, all of those things. And then we also have a website that's been created by, again, the curriculum team for parents, and it's extremely specific about all aspects of this virtual learning time. Every video that's on there describes how to do something, what information they need to know, and it tells parents where to go if they need extra support. So it's an outstanding website that's been created with a variety of topics. There are at least 25 topics on there. And in addition to that, yes, and in addition to that, there's also all of the videos of the standards lessons. So after the standards lesson has been taught, so last week's lessons are all available for a student to go back and watch the standards portion. Now, they aren't going to see the part where I worked with my teacher individually, but they will see the standards lesson.
Which was the first.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So how does this, because the bottom line is in the upper school and maybe in the lower school, they still have to take proficiency exams, don't they?
Yes. Nothing about Ohio's testing system has been altered
for
this virtual time.
So essentially, they still have to be prepared and tested to make sure that they are properly prepared for the big one.
Yes.
Because everything really hinges on them successfully passing that major exam every year, correct?
In order to graduate.
In order to graduate.
Yes.
Is it possible that they don't have to sit through any of the classes and still can sit for this exam?
No.
So they have to physically be engaged.
Yes, they have to be physically engaged to actually understand the instruction, to actually know what is going to be tested, number one, and number two, what does that mean and how do I use that information? Because memorizing is no longer what's expected on the test that they're given. They actually have to apply the information. So if I don't know the information,
they can't apply
they can't apply the information.
Oh my gosh. And if they do not successfully pass those proficiency exams, they get to do it all over again the following year.
And they don't graduate.
And they,
Correct. Yes.
This is the first cycle that you'll find out.
Yes.
Whether this is going to work.
Yes. We'll know in the spring whether what we did worked or not. And the reality of it is students, even in face-to-face instruction, have to take ownership of their learning, and they have to make sure that they are attending and engaging in the learning that the teachers are providing and in the teaching process. So in order for them to do that, they can do it virtually. They can also do it face-to-face. We'll see whether or not they chose to engage virtually, because I know the teachers are engaged because I drop in and out of their classrooms virtually as well.
Oh my goodness.
So
may I ask, how do you do that?
Yes, you have an invitation to their classroom, and we've told all of them that we'd like to be invited. And then the other way is, if I don't get an invitation, I do a walk around. I make sure that when I visit the school, I keep my mask on.
Yes.
I make sure I don't go more, than 6 feet close enough. But I drop in and I watch over the shoulder of the teacher and make sure that everything's going well and that there is no support needed, no extra help needed for any reason or anything.
Okay.
So we do the same thing that we did in face-to-face instruction. I've always visited classrooms.
Okay.
And the curriculum team visits classrooms, the OEC team visits classrooms. We have a schedule that we follow, a certain number of schools each week, each of us take, so that they see central office personnel out and supporting. So I'll do that the same way.
That's very good. With this system, because one of the things about technology, and I say that because I'm a left brainer, that kind of stuff makes me happy, but I also recognize that a significant segment of our population is right brain, and this is just sending them into spin cycle because they can't really process systematically the kind of information that you're giving out. Are there any thoughts about that, or has anybody else thought about that in terms of learning?
Technology-wise, we haven't altered anything for that type of learning, but in our instructional process, we do alter that. We do make sure that if you're left brain oriented, if you're right brain oriented, if you're midbrain like I am, I'm right in the middle.
That's good though.
Yeah, if you're right in the middle, or your either side of your brain learns differently. Because of the instructional process and the instructional procedures, that's where you pick up those learners. The problem is that I may not be a visual learner and I'm looking at a screen all day. That's a concern. That's a concern, and that's a problem because of the fact that I learn. I can hear you and I can learn auditorily, but if I'm a visual learner and I'm looking at the screen, I'm fine. But if I'm not, and I learn through another modality, that can be a problem.
How would you know this until it manifests?
Sometimes, most of the time, teachers can pick it up.
They can.
Most of the time, teachers pick up that there's a modality that's missing for that child, so they try to alter that. And in those small groups, especially in the K-3, where that a lot of time manifests itself, we start to see what kind of learner you really are whenever you're very young and starting out in that whole learning process. The teachers, because of those small groups, will be able to pick that up.
That's very, very, very good, because that's certainly a concern that I have, and that is that in our generation, we didn't even know about left and right. It was just do what your teacher says and get an A. Or if you're not understanding, get a tutor. But today, it's a little different. The learning has changed. Or has it?
It actually has changed. And anytime that a school system works with their teachers to understand how to actually differentiate curriculum and instruction, or how the brain actually works, which there's a ton of brain-based research about learning. Oh, yes. Whenever you go through that brain-based research, it talks about strategies that can be used in a classroom. There are also brain-based there's brain-based research about how children who live in poverty, also how they think through and work through processes and procedures. And it's a matter of making sure that staff understand those strategies and can use those strategies with their children, with their students that they work with.
So that research bifurcates by economic status. It actually has research to show that children that are poor children don't process the same way?
Well, I would not say that. What I would say about those strategies are that children who live in poverty, there are certain ways that you approach certain topics. There are certain ways, certain strategies that will affect them more quickly than not.
Really?
And for example, one of the strategies for children, for most children actually, is to actually directly model what you're talking about. Let them see it. For children who live in poverty, expecting that you would know about an airplane is not reasonable.
Okay.
Expecting that I teach you what an airplane is, and I model what an airplane looks like, and I remind you that you might see it flying over the city of Dayton because we do have an airport, or I take you to the airport on a field trip. I provide those experiences that perhaps because you're a child who's never been on a plane would never have that. So the experiential knowledge and understanding about how to make sure that I give you that experiential knowledge in some way before I expect you to master that particular topic is vital. And it works the same way for a child who lives in a rural area. They don't have some of the experiences that a suburban child might have. So the strategies that have come out about working with children in poverty are very clear about making sure that the experiences are provided for those children. Making sure that we work with those children to first model and engage them before we expect them to read something and
comprehend
and know what that means.
Yes. So there is that I did not know. I've been out of that field forever. I did not know, but I do know that that's good information because it gives hope. It gives hope that if they are exposed, because I really do believe that exposure is everything. If they have no exposure, then they cannot they can't relate. It means nothing in their world. So that has been vetted out. Thank you for addressing that because I did not know. So we're now into this virtual online, and you will find out whether it's going as hoped for by spring, and your proficiency tests will reveal the bottom line, which is, was this a good year or not? Does that impact your funding?
It does not impact our funding yet.
Okay.
And what,
I'm glad you did that caveat.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect it yet. What it does affect, however, is the fact that we were a district that received all Fs for a large number of years, many years.
Oh,
we received Fs on the state report card, and we were able to through the efforts and the work that we started. Actually, whenever I became the curriculum person, we were able to receive a D on the last state report card. And that raised us up out of what's called academic emergency and state takeover. And we missed that takeover because we earned a D. And we actually had some higher grades, for example, C in gap closing. And gap closing means that we're closing the gap for certain students. So we earned a C in that,
Okay.
the last report card that we had. So that means that the work we're doing with students with disabilities, students that are ELL or English language learners, those students, whenever we worked with them, we were able to close their achievement gaps.
Huh.
So we earned a C on that,
Okay.
and consequently we were a D district, so we were not taken over by the Academic Distress Commission in the state of Ohio.
I had no idea they actually do that.
Yes, they do. There are I think 4 or 5 that are under the control of the Academic Distress Commission around the state.
Oh, my words. Is
And-
that public information?
Yes. Mhm.
I'm going to look that up.
Yes, it's public information. The Ohio Department of Ed is the controlling factor in that, but the takeover is your board basically is removed from really making a lot of decisions, and there's a new board that's put in place that consists of outside personnel
Okay.
and also business leaders and things like that. And Dayton Public, we were able, after all these years of having these Fs, across the board academically, we were able to earn that D, and that gave us a reprieve for the next 3 years. So what a poor year will do for us is put us back in the cycle.
Right, well, you don't want that.
Correct, and
you
we don't
you
want
don't
that.
want that attached to you at all.
Right, so what we have happening is every few weeks, our teachers give something called a formative assessment, and we use a product called Ed Insights. So there are 3 to 5 questions, maybe 5 to 10 questions for the upper grades that test the standards that's been taught.
Okay.
And the students take that, and then we know whether or not they're understanding that standard, so the teacher can then go back and reteach that information. So all along the way, up through to the spring testing, we know what our students are able to do, what they're understanding, what we need to reteach. So it would not be a shock to us on what our score likely will be by the end of the year.
Okay.
Because we do those formative assessments regularly for all grades.
Intimately.
Yes.
Okay, that is absolutely amazing. So a person, if we're looking at, let's start with the little people, which is you do kindergartners, the little people, they so cute. What are your expectations of them virtually?
We have this similar expectations.
Same thing.
They meet. They have a large group meeting with their classroom teacher and a standards lesson that's taught by a DPS kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And then the teacher breaks out and works with the whole group and gets them engaged. And then the teacher meets with them in small groups as well.
Through that platform.
Correct.
How intimate is that? And is that necessary when you look at little people that age? They seem to require a lot more touch.
Yes.
They do. They seem to require a lot more engagement. So how does that happen under this other virtual when there's none of that going on? Are they looking to their parents? Or is the expectation that the parents are going to have to do what the teachers do?
I think we have to be co-educators during this time. Our teachers are doing it through a screen, and they're doing it in small groups, and they're talking to children, working with children, teaching children, having them interact and engage with each other and with the teacher. However, the parent also needs to engage their kindergarten children, their first grade children, all their children. They need to engage each one of them and have conversations about what they learned today. Did something go really well? Did you really like something that the teacher talked about? Is there a book that I can read to you to help you?
The questioning, back to the questioning.
So the parent needs to also engage with the student and make sure that the personal touch from the parent right now is maybe over much because the teacher's not also doing a personal touch.
Well, I know behind what is this pandemic, I have to believe that parents have a newfound appreciation for the role of a teacher, because I've read enough material to conclude that many parents did not even know their child. They just were going through the motions but had not invested in the child's learning. They expected the teacher to do that. Are you finding that has changed, or that parents are going to get more involved because of the necessity of the virtual requiring this?
I think that our parents have become more engaged because they had to, especially in the spring, with the fact that we only had one Chromebook per, you know,
Oh
2
my
or 3
gosh,
children,
yeah.
and they had to manage the time that they were able to be on the Chromebook, and then they had to manage the time that the bus would be there for the Wi-Fi and those types of things. So they had to be more involved in that way. But I think from a survey that we took, it was in May, June, we did a sampling of about 500 parents across the district, and we had a company do that for us so that we could actually not have any bias on ourselves.
Right.
So we wanted to really know what was being expected and what they felt they had learned and what they felt we had done both well and what we had done not so well.
Okay.
And about 76% of our teachers were so happy with what happened with the virtual learning whenever it was rather scattered in the spring and we didn't have enough Chromes and all of that. So 76% of them indicated that they were pleased that they had the contact with the teachers, because teachers were calling after hours, teachers were calling after the class was over, connecting with the parents. Parents were calling the teachers because they had questions about a lesson or something that occurred in the lesson. So I think that indicated that because of those comments and because of the way they rated several of those questions, that parents were much more engaged than perhaps they had been before.
But I think that's a positive.
It is a positive.
I mean, that to me is like, well, who would have thought? But it is absolutely critical that parents be parents. And it is not the teacher or the schools, this is my personal opinion, are not responsible for raising your children. They do an excellent job of preparing them through the educational process. However, they are not, in my opinion, responsible for raising the child and pouring the kinds of things in a child that only a parent can do. So let me ask you a question. Do you all have any involvement in, do you have social workers, psychologists? Do you work with that industry to help children that are having a tough time and parents that are having a tough time now?
We do. We have, in partnership with Dayton Children's Hospital.
Okay.
We actually,
fine hospital.
Yes, an outstanding hospital. We actually implemented a new series of personnel that we had not had in the district before. We started the process about a year ago, so it's very timely that we had this available when this pandemic hit. But each school has a position called a Student Resiliency Coordinator. They are actually trained social workers. They are licensed, trained social workers that Dayton Children's has hired, and we pay back the money to Dayton Children's, so we contract with them.
Okay.
And they are Dayton Children's employees, but they come into the building in which they're assigned. So all 26 of our buildings have a resiliency coordinator. This resiliency coordinator identifies and supports children that need outside counseling, for example, whether it's behavioral health, mental health, whether it's just some isolated incident that they need support on. They make sure that the parent, the teacher, the principal, they themselves, and the outside counselors that work with these children all have goals to help this student improve.
Yes.
And they keep track of those goals and monitor the metrics to make sure we're seeing improvement in the student's behavioral, mental health, whatever the issues are. So those personnel are on site and working with parents. They create a customized plan that's related specifically to you as the child who needs the support, by working with the parent, by working with the teacher, by working with the outside counselor. In addition to that, we also have social emotional learning videotapes that we have available for our students to watch and for their parents to watch, to make sure that if they're feeling stress about something, that they can watch this video and learn strategies
Coping
to de-stress,
skills,
to cope, all of those things. So those are also available as part of our virtual learning activities.
And that is accessible by the parent?
It's accessible by the parent and by the student. All they have to do is click on it.
And there
they
it
go on
is.
that website, and it's available there.
So do you know what the utilization rate is for that particular product?
I don't yet, but
Okay.
I think that we'll have some data close to the end of the month.
Okay, to see how many parents are
Correct.
taking advantage of that. I have to believe that I have to take the positive, which is a parent wants their child to do well, and they don't want to fall between the cracks. They really do. I think that a lot of parents don't have parenting skills. They don't know. In many situations, they don't know how to take that child down the path. Because truthfully, where do you learn? I mean, where do you learn how to parent? Other than mimicking or replication from your parents perhaps, or through television or but there's no consistent learning track. Each parent kind of works it out the best way they can. Have you found that to be the case?
I think that is true. I think that we actually, in all of our schools, I think we all need to offer parenting sessions and seminars and things like that for parents. But it is really, really, to be honest, very difficult for a parent who's trying to work and support their family.
Yes.
To make sure that they have food on the table,
Yes.
a roof over their head. And in this economy right now, it's even more difficult for families to do that. But throughout my career, we've always talked about training parents, working with parents so they understand the educational aspect, but also supporting parents in the discipline of their children, those kinds of things. And I think that schools take that on, and we probably are not the agency to actually take that on.
Okay.
I know that when my husband and I had our sons, they were young, and through a church group in our church, we actually attended parenting seminars.
Good,
And,
good.
Because of that, we learned what we were doing wrong, and then we also learned some strategies
Right.
about what we needed to do better. And I think that I think there's more than just a school system that needs to work with helping us rear our children, because it does take everybody in a community to raise children. And the parents, while they're solely responsible for that child's education, that child's well-being, that child's health, they need support.
They do.
And they need help, because it is an overwhelming task to think that I am responsible for this life.
Yes.
And this life I'm always responsible for
Forever.
it. I have a 35-year-old and a 33-year-old, and I feel responsible for them
You
still.
are, even though it annoys them to death. But it is true.
Yes.
Parenting is a permanent position.
Yes. And it's a very difficult position. And in economic situations like we're in right now, in a pandemic where everybody's, isolated from everybody else, it makes it even worse.
Horrible. I'm just saying that. Well, our time is up.
That went fast.
I told you. It goes fast. But I got most of my questions asked. And I would just simply say to you, I thank you for your willingness to be totally transparent about what you're dealing with. I know this is horrible. You don't have to say it. I just said it. I know it's hard, but it's got to come to an end. I mean, we suffered through polio. We suffered through smallpox. We suffered through some things in this country. Spanish flu. This is different, though, much more sophisticated. And it's challenging people in ways that I never could appreciate until now with the isolation.
Yes.
But you have the responsibility as superintendent of Dayton Public Schools of taking your people to the next level. And if this in fact